Hello guys, and welcome to my channel. In this video I'll be showing you how I made this color blocked hoodie t-shirt for my husband and for my baby girl. If you're interested in how I achieve these looks, please stay tuned. Alright guys, let's get started. I have 2.5 yards of this red stretch knit fabric and 2 yards of this gray stretch knit fabric. I'll be using one of my husband's t-shirts to trace for the pattern, and I'll also have a yard of black drawstring for the hoodie. I take the shirt and fold it in half to the back. Then I trace and cut the body of the shirt onto the craft pattern paper. I take and fold the shirt to the front and place it on top of that same pattern. Then I take my seam ripper and poke through to indicate the seam of the front neckline onto the craft paper. Then I trace the front neckline and add my 1/2 inch seam allowance. Now I have the back and front necklines for my pattern. I take the pattern piece and fold it across about 6 inches down from the neckline and cut across that fold. I take the top half of the bottom and tape just enough scrap paper at the bottom to add a 1/2 inch seam allowance. To add the seam allowance, I take my ruler and mark a 1/2 inch along the end of the pattern. Then I trace and cut along those points. Now I have my seam allowance added to the top half of the pattern. I also do the same for the bottom half pattern. To make the pattern for the sleeves, I lay the sleeve of the shirt onto the craft paper. I trace down on a diagonal from the underarm seam to elongate the sleeve. Then I take my seam ripper and poke through along the seam of the armhole. Then trace and cut. To make the pocket pattern, I trace an 8 by 13 inch rectangle. I measure 4 inches down from the side and 7 inches up from the bottom and connect those 2 points on a diagonal line. For the hood, I'll be using the same pattern that I made for my hoodie tutorial that I'll link below. I cut onto the fabric using all my pattern pieces, which include the front and back piece for the top half of the shirt in red, the front and back piece for the bottom half of the shirt in gray, 2 sleeves in red, the front pocket in gray, and the 4 pieces total for the hoodie. Also, all pieces have been cut on a fold except for the hoodie pieces. Starting with the front pocket, I take and fold over the diagonal sides a 1/4 of an inch twice to the back. And pin across. I do the same for the other side. Then I sew across with a straight stitch. Next, I take one bottom piece and the front top piece and line the straight ends together, right sides facing in. Then I pin and sew across with a straight stitch. I lay the front of the shirt right side up and line the front pocket with the bottom of the shirt at the center point of the shirt. I fold in 1/2 inch in and pin across the top of the pocket. I do the same for both sides of the pocket and sew with a straight stitch. After attaching the pocket, I lay the front of the shirt front facing up. I take the back of the shirt that I've already sewn together and place that front facing down on top of the front of the shirt. I line and pin the shoulders together and sew across with a straight stitch. open the armhole after sewing the shoulders together. I line and pin the center point of the sleeve and the shoulder seam together, then I continue pinning down both sides. I sew across with a straight stitch. After attaching the sleeves, I fold the shirt in half inside out and pin the underarm seams together on both sides. Then I sew straight down from the top of the sleeve to the bottom of the shirt with a straight stitch. Here's a closer look after the sides have been sewn together. I take all 4 pieces of the hood and line 2 pieces each together, right sides facing in, and sew along the curve with a straight stitch. Then I cut off the excess fabric. I take one side of the hoodie and measure 1 inch across, then 1.5 inches up on the bottom corner and mark at that point. I do the same for the other side. I take my buttonhole presser foot and sew buttonholes starting at those 2 points. I take my seam ripper and carefully cut open the slits for the buttonholes. I line the seams at the top of both hoodie pieces together, right sides facing in, then sew across the top with a straight stitch. After sewing together, I cut the excess fabric off. Then I turn the hoodie right side out. I open the hood back up. Then I sew a top stitch across the top about 1 inch wide from one buttonhole to the other. Next, I take the shirt and pin at the center point of the back of the neckline. Then I line the center seam of the hood at that point and pin together. I continue to pin at both of the shoulder seams. I fold the front neckline in half and pin at the center point. I take one end of the hood and overlap 1 inch from the center point of the front neckline and pin. I do the same for the other side. This time I'm going to sew around with a zigzag stitch. At this point, my husband tried the shirt on and decided he wanted short sleeves, so I'll show you how I altered them. Here's a pattern that I made from the original sleeves of the same shirt. With the shirt inside out, I place it directly on top of the armhole seam so the lines match together. Then I trace around the pattern and add an 1/2 inch seam allowance. I cut across the altered length, then sew a straight stitch along the altered underarm line. I turn the shirt right side out and hem the bottom of the sleeves and the bottom of the shirt with a zigzag stitch. Lastly, I pin a safety pin on the end of the drawstring and push it through one buttonhole. I continue to push and pull till I reach the opening of the other side. After adjusting the drawstring, the shirt is now complete. To make my baby girl's shirt, I used one of her long sleeve tees to trace and cut the patterns the same way I did for my husband's shirt. Those include the pattern for the sleeve, the front and back of the shirt, and the same hoodie pattern that's also made in the hoodie tutorial linked below. I used the leftover fabric and the same color scheme for her shirt. I adjusted the size of her front pocket and used a shoelace for her drawstring. I followed the same instructions and her shirt is complete. Alright guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.